Welcome back to the Automation Podcast. My name is Shawn, and this week on the show, I meet up with Adam Gluck from Copia Automation to learn about an exciting new feature they just added called Device Link. Adam, thank you for coming back on the Automation Podcast. Really looking forward to hearing about your recent announcement. But before we get into that, in case some of our listeners and viewers haven't seen the previous episode where you were on talking about Copia, could you just take a moment to introduce yourself to our audience and maybe just give us a short version of what Copia Automation is and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm super excited to be back on here. And obviously, we chatted around a year ago, and we've been building a lot since then. So I'm really excited to have this opportunity to share out with your audience some of the things that we've been working on. As far as what Copia does, we're basically focused, and we use the language DevOps for industrial automation. But really, what that means is helping teams build better operations, and particularly development teams and plant teams build better operations around how code gets to machines and gets deployed in production, and how to manage the code that actually lives on your industrial plant floor. And so that's really where we're focused. I can give a little bit more about the background of the company and our funding and that sort of thing if you're curious as well there.
Yeah, let's roll right into it.
Great. So, I mean, I think the big thing is, as we said, we're really focused on DevOps tooling, and DevOps, it's a big phrase and it's been knocked around a lot in the IT world, but it's really been kind of the de facto standard for how IT teams build code. It's focused on, Git-based source control, so how you actually manage your code, automate testing, a number of these different things that I'll talk about in a second. And really the goal of these, though, when we kind of drill into it, is to drive quality, increase the efficiency of engineering teams, and ultimately reduce downtime. So basically, as you imagine kind of the pain of working on a production site or industrial site, and making changes in the environment, things breaking, making sure that your code is up to date, things are reviewed, all the processes around how code is actually managed. And we see these sites with hundreds of PLCs or thousands of robots. And there's quite a lot of code now. There's quite a lot of changes that happen there, and this is really helping teams manage the process around managing those devices at the software and code layer. Our background, so we've been around for a little bit over 2 years now. It was founded by me and Matt Lee, and the goal was really to bring these best practices to automation. Since then we've raised quite a lot of money. So we've raised $16.4 million in Series C and A funding from top investors who've invested in numerous companies in the industrial space. And our company is currently 25 to 30 people, from a good mixture of IT and OT companies. So Altium, AWS, we have a Google employee, Atlassian, B&R, Automation, MDT, Uber, National Instruments, Dassault, and it goes on. So our head of engineering, we actually pulled directly out of GitHub. So we really tried to build a team that was based around people who understood the OT space super well and lived in that space for a long time, but also people from the IT world who had built different software systems and were familiar with how this stuff works. So we're really software heavy team, but with a strong focus on obviously the industrial space and having that in our DNA. And when we talk about DevOps, and I can go through this quickly, we're really focused on, as I said, driving productivity and uptime. And there's this whole DevOps stack. The main reason I come back to this and our go-to-market product has been this kind of Git-based source control product, is that our eventual plan is to build out this whole stack. So build out all these processes. So making sure that you can kind of manage your code and find different versions, do code review, make sure that code's tested effectively, have a good model for deploying that code, and then once it's deployed, integrating with monitoring and systems that already exist to make sure you didn't break anything. So it's really, how do you make changes in a safe way in industrial environments? And so we really look at this, and I'll jump through this, but this is kind of the state of the world as people are familiar with. So you kind of have an archive folder is kind of the common way of managing backups, which makes it hard to review code and keep track of what you actually have. And we're moving towards, Git-based source control and collaboration system, manual testing. I always say, we talk to a water slide company. We said, how do you test your code? And they say, hey, we go down the slide. I think that's pretty emblematic of the typical way that code gets tested. There's obviously really high-end sims, but a lot of times engineers are left struggling for having a good test environment to test their code. For actual deployment, so obviously there's a lot of different ways code gets onto these machines. It's not all through a consistent process. And then, limited observability. So as we go and talk to different industrial companies, and we've talked to hundreds now, we find that these sorts of problems exist in every single industrial environment. Actually, our head of sales says this is the only product that he's actually talk to customers in 95% of opportunities, 95% people that we talk to when we do discovery and have those initial conversations have some pain point around this. And it can be very acute in different organizations based off of the scale of the team and the type of development environment, that sort of thing. And really our goal is to solve that entire problem, make it much, much order of magnitude easier for engineering teams to manage all the code that they're ultimately managing in production. So as I said earlier, the standard site we go to has maybe 100 to 150 PLCs. It can have numerous robots, it can have sensors, all these devices, they're all running code. You actually think about those as hundreds of code bases that people are actually managing in production. So it's quite painful over time to manage those. And there's all these operational problems, and there's a standard tool chain that solves those problems. And so really we're introducing that tool chain.
Now, I want to interrupt Adam. I just want to throw out there for the listeners, you think about the archived folder, which is how we did things. I mean, we were excited to get a network right back in the 80s. It was exciting that we had our PCs networked together and we could have an archived folder, because we know all those floppy disk and tape drives, that those tapes, they were notorious for losing the program. And the floppy disks, they didn't last very long. So, well, some of them lasted, quality got better over time, but get it next to a magnet and it's toast, right?
Yeah.
So being able to do the archive folder over a network shares, networking, that was great when you maybe had 50 to 100 PLCs and maybe 25 to 30 HMIs. But now on our production lines, we have so many smart devices. It's not just the PLC and the HMI anymore, right? The network switch has a configuration. In many cases, you're using a managed switch, right? You have motion controllers, you have VFDs, you may have IO link devices, you may have photo eyes that have smarts in them, or servo drives, or just looking, and now we have MQTT configurations, and we have OPC, RS Link, SCADA. There's a lot of stuff, right? And ask yourself this: are you sure you have everything backed up? Are you sure? I'm not even going to talk about documenting your system. Do you have every single file, the current file, in every device backed up somewhere? And is it also backed up off-site, right? So if you go through the pillars of ensuring that you have a good backup plan, right, for all your electronic devices, it's not just all having a copy of it on your server. You also have to have a copy off-site, because when you lose that data, right, if there's a fire in the office where the server is, right? Most companies go out of business, right? So, just to try to get the audience to think about this a little bit, we've come a long way over 30, 40 years in our systems today. And I know you guys out who are listening, you're living this today, right? And so that's where a product like Copia fits in. And what they're using is the model that the PC people, the web developers have really refined over the last few decades. And, it's a robust, it's a solid system that's fully been vetted on their side, and now Copia is bringing that, making that same technology available on the industrial side. So I'm sorry, Adam, for going through that, but I felt I wanted to paint that picture from the last 30, 40 years to where we are today, and why a solution like this is important.
Yeah, no, and that's really helpful context, and it actually kind of relates to something that I like to talk about too, because people sometimes ask, well, why now? Like, why didn't this solution already exist, right? And one of the big answers I give is very similar to the one that you just gave here, where it's like, hey, we see this almost like software eating the world for industrial automation, where the amount of code bases, the amount of code that is running an industrial operation, has multiplied, over the years. And so whereas this might have been a small pain point before, we're now seeing teams, managing fleets and fleets and fleets of devices, thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of devices, across their entire operation, corporate operation globally, and it just is really hard. It's a really hard problem to solve, and that's where this tool chain comes in. And then to your kind of final point, and I think that sets up this slide really nicely, is none of this stuff is stuff we just like made up. It's actually been battle tested. So if you look at a Google or a Facebook or any of these companies, they've been using this in productions with tens of thousands, Microsoft, tens of thousands of engineers. So likely, you're already relying on software tools that rely on this tool chain to work properly, right? So it's not just a web app, it's actually this kind of broader way that engineers have come to develop really fundamental infrastructure that runs the internet. So, and where Copia comes in, and where I kind of think of our design philosophy, is there's enough nuance, there's enough complexity in the industrial tool chains that exist, that we actually have to do some work on top of those tool chains. So, one thing we really focus on is IEC language compatibility. So, if you're doing source control, you're managing the files. Well, those files are in binary or text, but you code in ladder or function block diagram, or sometimes sequential flow chart. And we need to render that and show people, what's actually changing. And that makes these tools actually usable in the space. And so that's been a big kind of focus for us, is how do we take these tools that we know work, the fundamental platform is stable in the IT space, but then make them work really well for the industrial space. And this is what that looks like, what I mean? So this is kind of shows, oh, this is actually a diff. This actually enables us to understand what's changed in code as you're coding. So instead of sitting there and either actually sitting there and comparing two screens to each other or using a diff tool, this actually automatically is showing you these diffs. And that enables you to do some of these things that are special to Git, which is, branching and having your own environment to code in before you merge it back, rendering diffs, and then reviewing and code commenting becomes, another really, really powerful feature in this, where suddenly you can say, hey, instead of sending someone a file over email or when I was starting the company, people, this is before remote and a lot of the remote kind of workforce stuff started, but people would be like, we just sit next to each other's computers and we'd look at the code. There's still people obviously that print off PDFs is a really common way of doing code review. You can actually have a browser native way of doing code review, where suddenly you're really reviewing what happens there. And then you really see here, source control ends up being the root of our solution. So this is an example of, I think, function block diagram with Siemens here. So you can really see some of these powerful rendering in the browser, enabling people to really work with these tool chains that, again, have been proven, but in an ergonomic way in the industrial space. And then here's an example of code review. And so that's been, where you can actually add code commenting and all of that stuff.
So I want to go back, and I just want to, for the audio only audience, what we're looking at, and this is inside of the Copia solution, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm looking inside the Copia tool itself. I'm looking at programs, routines, main routine from an Alan Bradley perspective, right? And I'm seeing the ladder logic there, and there's a conversation going on. And then it's the same thing with the Siemens example, right? So here's the Alan Bradley example where, the question is, hey, do we remove this? And the answer is, oh yeah, we have to do this and that. So yeah, that's, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but so they're able to talk about why did this change? What was the reason for it, and able actually to document that in there. In the Siemens example, they're using function blocks, and it's very much the same thing where the differences or the diffs between the old and new program can be commented on by the people who are writing the code or by the people who are maintaining the code. So that's very powerful. You definitely want that. Just having the before and after really isn't too helpful. It's like having a PLC program without any documentation, right? It's like, well, why was this changed? You need that knowledge, that knowledge transferred into the system so people understand why this course of events happened. So I just wanted to throw that out there for the audio audience. We're actually documenting the differences, the diffs in the before and afters inside the Copia 2, looking at something that's very visual and graphical. So you would recognize this as an Alan Bradley program. And on the previous slide, you would recognize that as a Siemens function block.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a big reason why we say DevOps is actually supporting a process, right? Because it's basically saying, here's a set of tools that enable you to have a process to get your code onto machines that works, right? A code that is not going to break things. And if it breaks, you can go back and understand what changed. So that's where these tools become really powerful. And a big area of investment here for us has been these IEC languages. So for us, it's like you go to a company and we find increasingly that a lot of our customers are multi-vendor. So even honestly, when I started the company 3 or 4 years ago, and started talking to people about this, I was seeing oh, we're just floor to ceiling X vendor, or we're floor to ceiling Y vendor. But we've seen a lot of customers, either across different sites or even within the same site, embracing more and more vendor variety. And one piece of that was the chip shortage over the last few years. So we're like, I just need something,
Yeah.
And so that really changed things. But I think also, as buying models have changed within these companies, we see that they're actually going to a lot more vendors and trying out a lot more platforms. And really where we come in is that we're multi-vendor. So when we talk about a consistent workflow, it's not just, hey, there's a consistent workflow for one vendor. It's across all these devices, across any way we make changes in our environment.
And these are some pretty big names. We have Rockwell Automation, Siemens, Codesys, Schneider, Wago, Beckhoff, ABB, and Lens. Those are some of the top names in the industry.
Yeah, and that's been a big investment for us to be like, how do we get a broad enough set of support? And actually for our device link product, which I'll talk about in a second, we actually have FANUC support as well and generic FTP, so we can support, a huge number of sensors. So it's really how do you get as broad support as possible so that you can actually enable people to really have this workflow. This is a case study. This is with DMC, which is a major North American system integrator, and they're really using this tool. I think the key, and this actually, I'm sorry, this is actually slightly off. It's actually 8 hours back a week. So we were seeing from DMC that once you have all these practices in place, you're actually seeing quite a lot of improvement in efficiency for these teams, because then you're enabling senior engineers, as opposed to doing all this file management. They're actually helping individual more junior engineers, and they can actually say, hey, just upload this, follow this process, then I'll review it. So it makes that back and forth and saves a lot of time at the senior level. And then when we're looking at more, entry-level engineers, we're really seeing 3 to 4 hours back a week just in file management and diffs and all this stuff. So it's quite a lot of cruft there. And so I think there's the time saving, but then there's also the quality and the uptime piece as well. So that's been pretty powerful for us. So that's everything we've done up to date. And then we have some of those product announcements. But do you have any other questions on this stuff before I go into kind of looking ahead a little bit at the more recent launches we've done and products that we've shipped?
No, I think that was a great review of kind of a very short version of what we did last year, and I'm excited to get into the new stuff now. So go ahead.
Yeah, let's jump in. And I'm pretty excited about this stuff. So let's jump in. I mean, one thing I do want to bring up where we've been focusing over the last year is, security. So one thing is we did focus on getting to SOC 2 compliant. We actually work a lot with enterprise companies. So being able to actually support, that kind of enterprise IT InfoSec review. That's always painful and an important part, though, of making sure we're shipping products that are actually secure, don't introduce security vulnerabilities. Integration. So as you said, we actually have quite a broad set of vendor support now. But the big thing that we're super excited about that we're talking about here is device link. It's kind of funny because you were saying, well, it's not just PLC, it's all these other devices. And actually, when we started with device link, we called it PLC link. But then as we started talking to customers, we realized the scope of the problem was so broad that we weren't actually just going to be dealing with PLCs, where our source control product was really focused on surrendering. Once we got on device link, we're really going to be focusing on a broad set of devices. And what that looks like is, how do you automatically back up these devices? And this really enables you to close the loop between source control and plant floor. So one way that our VP of Biz Dev likes to say, Matt, who is also the first employee and a co-founder at Copia, likes to describe it as, source control prevents you from shipping something that's broken, but device link and auto backup lets you catch it if something does get deployed that's maybe broken. So having these two processes together are really powerful. And so device link is really focused on this. And so this is really our Git-based automatic backup solution. And the goal of this is to bring visibility into this industrial change management. So if you're talking about those hundreds of devices, and this is something that kept coming up with our customers, is those hundreds of devices, they actually, people are still pushing changes to them. So even if you have great source control practices, you might have a vendor come in, or a technician, or someone who hasn't been trained yet, or someone who's just in a hurry who ends up pushing changes anyway. So even once we got this kind of source control and collaboration piece going, people are like, well, we love this and we think it will work, but we actually want to still catch things in case we mess up. So it's kind of a critical piece of that overall process. And then where Copia is strongly differentiated is that whole source control piece is tied to the backup piece. So you're actually kind of in the same space. You're using the same repositories. Development and plant management ends up being able to use the same repositories and the same kind of space for understanding what changed there. And it gives that strong visibility into like, hey, this is what we think is in production, but this is what's actually in production. And then you can resolve that, and figure out what's happening there. And the logic for it's pretty simple. And I think having this mental model is really helpful. Is basically we have and by the way, this model looks like an ignition SCADA system. It looks like any of these other kind of systems that are out there, and we use similar infrastructure and architecture, where you have an agent running in the field. And actually, we've even had people who run these agents in the cloud, but that's super, that's more atypical. But you have an agent running in the field. It's on the plant, and it's connected to all the different devices, on the plant floor, and then it's communicating back through the network to the Copia app. And we have our own cloud hosted solution, app.copia.io, and that's where people go to can go in the browser and see what's happening. But a lot of our enterprise customers want to host it in their own network, and so they'll use a VPC, a virtual private cloud, and they'll host it in their own private cloud with IP whitelisting and all of that good stuff. So there's varying degrees of security there. But the main thing that's nice is even if you're using a VPC or cloud hosted solution, you can get into the browser. So the architecture here, you can start to look at these files in the browser as opposed to needing to have a whole new DLL and all the software. So the key thing here is, the architecture is pretty straightforward. You have an agent in the industrial site, and then we back up the logic to some cloud hosted solution that gives you access for different people on your team, and they don't have to always be downloading software to access this. So it's a pretty lightweight overall install and architecture.
Now can we talk about the security? So it makes sense that you would have this software running in the plant that's going out there and fetching all the code and backing it up. What can you talk about the security? Because I think this is where most of the listeners are going to and viewers are going to be like, okay, now when that connects to Copia in the cloud, how do we make that tunnel secure? Can you talk about that? If I'm stealing your thunder, I apologize.
No, and I think that's a really critical question. It's something we think about a lot. Obviously, we invest in SOC compliance, very early stage for a company actually, which is a really intense, basically sort of audit where people are evaluating all of not only your code, so you do network penetration tests, but also your internal policies. So like if someone misuses data, do they get fired? Do they get reprimanded? What happens there? And also, code review and all these different engineering processes. There's a lot of stuff involved with that, and we've invested in that really early, and then we're kind of at this point continuously under audit as part of that. So we got SOC 2 Type 1, which is a snapshot, and now we're going to SOC 2 Type 2, where the same auditors who said, okay, things look good right now, but do you keep doing it when we look away? They're coming back and asking us those hard questions. So from a software, and so this is the first part of the question, from a software policy process perspective, how Copia operates and how we build and write code, it's designed to be really secure, and we're using all the best practices there and have external auditors which confirm that. The second piece is, well, how is this particular software system architected to be secure? And the key thing there is we use best practices there as well. So for example, the way the agent architecture works is it pulls the backend. So there's never a cloud pushing to the agent, it's all outbound requests. And so a lot of firewalls and industrial sites are set up to not allow inbound requests, but they can allow outbound. And so that kind of enables this. The second piece of that is that all of this is read-only. So we're only basically pulling data out of the industrial site as opposed to pushing data into the industrial site, pushing changes to the PLC. And so in that way, it looks like a lot of the digital transformation, IoT efforts, a lot of what these sensors are gathering are also getting pushed to a cloud system, either in a VPC. A lot of it, especially enterprise companies, have their own cloud that they already have these kind of tunnels to. And then, or our cloud, which actually a lot of customers are okay with as well. So it's really, kind of building on best practices for security, and ultimately the architecture doesn't look any different than, a SCADA system or any sort of IoT or digital project. Essentially, it ends up being another piece of data that you're pulling out of the industrial site, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. The fact that the Copia cloud does not try to write down to the PLCs in the plant, that the agent collects that data and it's a one-way from the plant up to the cloud, and that you have a secure tunnel there with encryption, so that even though it's only read-only, and it's that the competitor is not going to be able to intercept that stream of data and decipher what your top secret recipe is for your product. And I think that's important that we covered that. So let me let you continue. I apologize for interrupting.
Yeah, and we've gone through every flavor of security review. So we have Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies that are already using the product, and it's pretty intense. It's almost like another audit of the software. Sure. So we really go through that quite a bit. Now it's funny you're mentioning that we don't push to the devices. We actually, it's funny, like we kind of talk about this because we get some people who always see this backup and they're like, great, can I deploy? They want it right away. Sure. We kind of held off on that for now, partly because of some of these security things. But it is kind of funny that we do get that request quite a lot. So there is maybe a way of doing that where you have someone sitting on the site who does the final approval or whatever for the push or that sort of thing. So, yeah. But we're not messing around with that quite yet. Just for an idea of what the software looks like, and it's maybe what you would imagine if we talk about this backup software, but the goal is really, as we said, to provide visibility into the plant floor. So what we're hearing from a lot of customers is, well, what's actually running? As you said, do you have all of your stuff backed up? You know what I mean? What's actually running there? And so, what we do is we run jobs at regular intervals. And you can kind of see here, example of a job that would be running in this environment. And so, you kind of run these every 24 hours or, once a week or whatever you think that backup interval is. And then we basically show if the result's complete. We also show, if we've identified a change. So we'll say, hey, this is what you have currently existing. So you see that status field there that says complete or in progress. We'll also say, file modified. So we'll say, hey, we found there was a change. Actually, something has changed. And then we'll create a branch. So we use kind of these Git primitives. And we say, hey, this is what's changed. Is this actually, and then a senior engineer can kind of come in and say, hey, I don't know what this is, and then we also alert you. So the goal really is you have this running all the time. Ideally, nothing's really changing that you don't expect, but the reality is it does, and kind of frequently, especially if you have hundreds of devices. And we really give you the visibility into what changed there, and then you can go see the change. So I'm using kind of the diffing and visual logic that we showed earlier.
Yeah, and I think with the Great Resignation and a lot of people retiring, I think you find more and more people are just running around getting the plant going. And a lot of the, steps to tried and true, I'm going to back it up every time I make a change, and I'm going to make sure it's on the server. And a lot of that has unfortunately, and not on purpose, but just because of the situations, have gone by the wayside. People they're not crossing the T's and dotting the I's as much as they would have previously, just because people are short-handed, and that's just a fact. So I think that's where something like this is extremely important.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then you pair that with, things are getting bigger, not smaller. You have bigger production sites, more automation, more code. Also, there's the whole trend of actually just investing a lot more in automation, because some of these sites just won't run if they're not automated anymore. No one's there to do the jobs anymore. It becomes more and more critical. So. And so as we dig in here, here's an example of scheduling a job for an on-demand backup. So you can see here, this is what a recurring job looks like. It's just a nice UI. And you can do that we have these custom cron schedules. So you can kind of do any sort of schedule of backup that you want. Although we say once or twice, a week or once a day, it tends to be what makes sense for people.
And that would be, just for the audio listeners, that would be the same thing you would do to set the recurring appointment or alarm on your phone. You got Monday through Sunday, you got daily specific days, times, and then you have the custom schedule. So it's all the settings you would expect.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very standard UI, and for us, usability is really important. We continue to talk to our customers, about how to improve the product, and even as we're going to next year, a lot of our core functionality is there for this product. So what's really next for us, and it continues to be usability. So how do we make these workflows easier for people to adopt? How do we? I mean, the goal is to make life easier for people, right? So how do we do that even within the product itself? So, and then here, as you can see, and this is what I was talking about earlier. Everything's integrated with our source control tool. So if you're already using our source control, you can actually then start to say, hey, well, this is what's different than what we thought was there. And it shows the visual difference. But the other piece of this is, we see some people are like, we really care about backup, and source control, something we want to get to. So you can be using kind of the same, repositories or the same Git-based logic for all your backup. And once you're ready to start putting the process in place for source control, and really saying, hey, okay, well, we catch things if they break, but now we want to stop them from breaking. So let's get code review and all these best practices in place. You're not changing tools. You're using one tool to manage your process for how code gets onto machines. And then if code gets onto those machines that you're not expecting, you're using the same tool to resolve those issues and get to a good state.
If you don't mind, we have a large Allen Bradley audience, and I think the ControlLogix users, CompactLogix users, will really they're looking at this and they're like, wow, that looks like RS Logix or Studio 5000, because you have the tasks, you have the programs, you have the routines and whatnot. So it's very graphical. You'd feel very familiar if this is your program. You know what the oven routine does, you know what the mixer routine does. And here you can see highlighted the rungs that have changed. But I also noticed their modules. Does it also look at the modules? Any differences in the modules?
Yes, yeah, we do capture that. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, kind of our policy is obviously we want to try and show as much as we can. So everything comes up and is important when you're making changes. And then, using, it's basically anything that's in an Allen Bradley project, we can pretty much render. You can see here actually in this UI, we do have this view XML diff. So the underlying logic of this is XML. So if you really want to get granular, you feel like there's something missing, it will almost always be in that XML diff. But at this point, we essentially render everything with Allen Bradley. So. And this is a case study, so I can't talk too much about the company itself, but I think I'd share this quote from one of our early users, which is really back to this idea of maintaining code visibility and maintaining quality across the factory floor. And we see here, we'd like better visibility into the state of machines and constantly monitor the floor. Part quality can be impacted by poor revision, which also causes disruptions. It's important for a single place to store backups across multiple vendors. And really what this customer was dealing with is the fact they had quite a lot of devices. So I think they had 1,000 robots or something like that. So it's a quite large industrial site. And what they were seeing is people were constantly pushing changes to those, and it would lead to these kind of 2 to 4 hours of downtime. So there's a real, and this gets to the ROI for this, which is there's a real ROI benefit to having some of this stuff in place and visibility into production, because it's a question of, hey, are we going to catch this 2 weeks down the road and something's broken, or are we going to catch it right now? Right when the change happens. So enabling that visibility and kind of almost real time kind of feedback when things change is super powerful. Another example is we talked to a different company and they lost millions of dollars of production because of a change. And so they were saying, hey, if we could actually come in and have caught that change, which anyone who actually worked in our site would have realized, but it was an external person, we would have been able to prevent that loss of production. So it's interesting in the sense of there's a lot of pain, I think, in the process of how you manage code in these environments. Things break, collaboration is difficult, all these things that we talk about. But then the real ROI happens when something breaks and you don't have these processes in place. And then you're like, well, we need to get them in place. So we sometimes see companies come in and they'll not invest in this, and suddenly something goes really wrong. And they're like, oh crap, we actually need this, need this now. And so this company had kind of already identified that pain point, and they were ready to kind of invest and work on a solution for it.
Yeah, I want to talk about ROI too for a second, because a lot of the solutions on there in the market, and I have personally deployed some of them myself with some great customers I used to work with. The initial investment is huge. I mean, it is huge. You need a server class machine and then a very expensive license just to get started. And being the fact that your system is cloud-based, I think, putting together a test system, I think the initial investment would be substantially smaller to say, okay, I got these 5 PLCs my guy's always editing and working on. Let's just do that with Copia on the cloud. No server. I don't have to buy a server. I don't have to buy a software license all up front. I don't have to make this a capital project up front to get a basic system going. And then as you grow, yeah, it could cost more. But I think that's one thing to think about with a solution like this, is you're not having to put the entire investment up front for a system that you don't even know if you're going to use to its potential, because we all know not every system you buy for your users actually get used, right? Sometimes they click, sometimes they don't. So that just, when you were talking about ROI, I'm like, man, it is, once you get, trying to get those capital budget projects approved can be difficult. And there's really no way to run a test, right? There's no inexpensive way to test. There's most people don't have a test server and a test license and,
Yeah.
a few hundred hours lying around to test the system out.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. And especially for our cloud-based customers, like the setup is really easy because you're not commissioning your IT team to set up a server. Typically, we install the agent and the device link case on the server that's already in the industrial site, and that's typically already running Ignition or any sort of other, factory software, and it's a 60 megabyte install. So it's really quite lightweight. And so from our perspective, it's like, let's make something that's pretty easy to deploy. And then obviously we have engineers on our team that work with our customers. So if you're wiring up 150 devices, for your 1 year pilot or whatever, we're saying, okay, we'll wire it up for you and just get you going, as kind of an entry point. And so we tend to work with our customers to get that initial setup going. And then once that's there, it's pretty much running,
So it sounds like it's very lightweight device link. You said it was 60 megabytes?
Yeah, yep. So
That
that's
is
basically.
tiny. That's awesome. That's awesome, right? I mean, the
Yeah,
programming software, we're usually looking at many gigs, you know what I'm saying, for each version of, let's say, Studio 5000, many gigs. Um, the other thing is a lot of these other vendors, it has to be a dedicated box. What you just said was very impressive. If you already have a box that's a server that's sitting there running, Ignition or FactoryTalk View or WinCC or InTouch or whatever, you can
yeah.
put this on there, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, I should have included this slide because I can actually show the installation, but it's just, something that you'd put on a Windows VM or something like that. So you can put a Windows VM on one of these machines and run it, or on an existing, Windows server that's sitting there, Windows device. I mean, we've had people actually run it off their laptops, and actually when we're testing it, we have people run it off their laptops. And do an install. So we've done a 1 hour meeting where we're like, hey, why don't you just download this to your machine, the agent, just connect to a device and just do one backup just to see that it works, and people just run it right there. So it's pretty lightweight in that way. And then, from there, it's pretty straightforward. Actually, it's funny. One of our people on our team, he's he's worked on a lot of industrial software in his career, and he was going back and installing some stuff on his machine. He's like, I forgot how big of a pain in the ass all this was. you know? So it's pretty easy, and a big reason for that is like most of the business logic exists on the server, So if people are doing self-hosted, so they host it in their own cloud, there is more upfront cost involved in that, obviously. But that's just a question, if you're like, hey, those security requirements are really big for us and we need to run this on our own infrastructure, that's always going to be a little bit harder. But people who use our cloud, it can be really fast, actually. So
No, I think the next question might be, and I apologize if we're taking a sidebar here, but I think the next question would be whenever somebody starts thinking about a package like this, and maybe they do have Rockwell and Siemens and Group Schneider or Schneider Electric, sorry. Are there like driver packages they have to buy? Like,
yeah, so typically, we don't actually, I mean, that's not how we price really. So the way that we price is by device. Sometimes if you have a lot of machines in industrial, so you might need multiple agents to kind of
sure.
parallelize the requests. So we charge by device, by agent, and then, there's one other thing I'm forgetting, and then by seat for source control as well. And so, that's basically the standard cost there. And so we kind of include it all, in the future, as we get to weirder and weirder, further out vendors, I guess I shouldn't say weirder, but further out vendors that have less adoption in the market, we might look towards, some drivers. But no, we don't charge separately for a driver.
So your agent already knows how to talk to those vendors you showed us, the Rockwell and the Siemens and so on.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, great. So you don't need a expensive third-party driver to make this work, I guess is what I was asking.
Yeah. I mean, in some cases, you might actually have to have some of the vendor software installed on your machine already.
Okay,
Just so we can actually maintain a connection with those devices.
sure.
But I don't think that it tends to be for customers. They have license agreements and that sort of thing already with the vendor, so we haven't seen that be a big issue. Outside of that, that's a lot of what I came here to share. I think the big thing, to come back to, and this is kind of, increasingly, how we're looking at the company is, Copia's goal is to bring modern DevOps tooling to industrial automation. Our vision's, device link, which is an important piece of this because it closes the loop between how you actually write and build code as a team and, the actual deployment process, and how you're actually connecting devices in the industrial site itself. But really, we want to bring higher quality production to the global industrial base. And the thing, as I've been working on this company for years now and talking to a lot of different manufacturers and industrial companies, is we don't talk to anyone who doesn't have a flavor of this problem, who doesn't run into some of these challenges with processes, doesn't run into some of these challenges with making sure the code is correct, that don't have outages, that don't have efficiency gains that they could get. And so really when we look at the scope of our product, it's really how do we actually transform the way that code gets built in these environments? And as you're talking about, increasingly, more and more PLCs, more and more industrial automation. And I think the actual elevation of industrial automation as a role within these businesses that are increasingly, I mean, I think it always was really, really, truly critical. For a lot of companies, it's become this binary of like, do you survive and automate or do you die as a business? I think this tooling is moving from being kind of maybe even 4 or 5 years ago nice to have to a must have if you're going to have a high quality, efficient engineering operation. So the adoption we're seeing has been great, and the excitement we've seen from industrial engineers has been really, really good. So we're really excited to continue to talk to people and hopefully drive a solution that has real impact and actually makes people's lives better, and ultimately, increases the quality of the stuff that we are producing. So it's been pretty exciting.
Yeah, and I think adding device link to your portfolio that's like a major piece. I think that's exciting, and that's why I wanted to get you guys on the podcast after seeing the announcement. I'm like, wow, that's a big deal. But let's say somebody's listening. So we just have thousands of people consuming the podcast every month, and just if somebody's listening and they wanna get their hands on it, they want to learn more, maybe they want to have you present to their management, who would they contact? How do they get in contact with Copia Automation?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way is just go to our website. It's copia.io. .coms are expensive these days, but it's copia.io is the website, and you can go there and you can request a meeting with our sales team or request a demo through there, and we'll get right back to you from that conversation. Darren's on the call still. Darren, is there any other way you recommend people reach out?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So I guess it's important to know you can actually talk to us directly through a chat tool right on our website. If you're looking at our Git-based source control, you can actually sign up for a free trial as well. And then you can always email us at contact@copia.io.
That's awesome. That's a great way to get in touch with you guys. And I really want to thank you, Adam, for coming on the show and walking us through that. I hope the audience, if you guys are interested in something like this, please get in touch with the guys. They're awesome people to talk to, and they'll walk you through what they have to offer and let you know if it's right for you. But thank you again, Adam, for coming on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. I mean, this is really fun, and I love keeping the dialogue going. One last thing that might also be worth mentioning to any listeners is, if you're interested but you don't know enough yet, at copia.io we have a lot of content and videos on what the product does. So we have more in-depth demos there, and then we also do very regular internal webinar or external webinars. So if you are interested and you want to learn more before you reach out to us, we have a lot of material and we're continuously building up, and that might be a valuable place for you to learn more about the product as well.
That's awesome. Thank you guys for coming on.
All right. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I want to thank Adam for taking time out of his busy schedule to come on the show and tell us all about Device Link. It sounds very, very cool. That said, if you did enjoy this episode, please consider giving us a like and a sub. And if you know anybody looking for PLC, HMI, or SCADA training, please send them over to my website, theautomationschool.com. You can also follow me and get in touch over at automation.locals.com. And with that, I just want to wish you all a very happy, safe, and healthy week. And until next time, my friends, peace.